Not all heroes walk on 2 feet. In fact, some of them have 4 legs. That is certainly true of Muggins, a purebred Spitz dog that raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for charity during World War I and after, becoming an international celebrity in the process. Now he is the subject of the new book, Muggins, The Life and Afterlife of a Canadian War Hero. I'm joined now by author Grant Hayter-Menzies. Welcome, Grant.
Thank you very much.
Now, you've written about animals before, but what drew you to take up the story of Muggins?
Well, I was actually at one of my a book signing for one of my earlier books, a biography of another dog, Rags, who was the mascot and messenger dog and overall companion to the American First Division in World War I France. And this was at Tanner's Books in Sydney, here on Vancouver Island. And that was in, I think, 2015. And I was approached by a scholar, Dr. Sylvia Van Kirk, a retired University of Toronto professor, who asked me as I was signing her book if I knew anything about a local dog from World War I called Muggins. And I said, I have never heard anything about Muggins. We talked a bit about him. She said, would you be interested in co-authoring a book with me about him? And I said, well, I'd think about it. It wasn't, as I say in the book, I'm not a great collaborator. I usually don't know what I want to say when I begin a book, and I usually don't know a whole lot about the subject. I learn as I go along, and I find that's better done by myself. So it didn't go anywhere. And then when a few years later I had another signing for my biography of Wu, the monkey companion of Emily Carr, Dr. Van Kirk approached me again, and this time she said, I think you're the one to write this, and may I come over to visit you, and I'll bring all of my Muggins research. So she did that, and luckily I was able to take it on, and in part aided by lockdown. During those months, I had ample opportunity to complete the research and the book.
Now, how does a dog like Muggins become such a focal point, even in death?
Well, because animals can't leave records. They can't leave anything except memories, really, photographs, impressions on us, humans. He left an indelible mark on many people who worked with him, who just met him. I found all kinds of newspaper articles in my research, people who lived abroad, people who lived in the U.S., who came through Victoria between 1916 and 1919, who met Muggins and couldn't forget him. It wasn't just his little get-up of wearing the two collection tins on his harness, as depicted on the cover of the book, but it was his personality. He had what were described as speaking eyes, lovely, very direct look. He was very. He would show his appreciation for donations put in his collection tins, and like all dogs, he wanted to be loved, and made that very obvious to perfect strangers. And I know for I had never heard of him until I did the research, and I don't think many people in Victoria remember anything about Muggins, but the Red Cross remembers him very, very clearly, and they still consider him to be their mascot. You still see photographs of him at their headquarters. So just as people leave impressions that last for generations, animals do the same thing.
Now, Muggins, as you mentioned in the book, was what they call a collection dog, and it turns out this followed a long tradition dating back to Victorian times.
Yes, there was a practice in England of having collection dogs at train platforms. In some cases, when these very much loved dogs died, their bodies were preserved and put in glass cases, and you could still drop coins in for whatever particular charity that it was that they had been working for. I think this might have been one of the sources for Muggins being turned into a collection dog by his guardian, Beatrice Woodward. He had started out as a lap dog, really. He was born in the home of a wealthy philanthropist in Calgary in about 1913. And he, by being handed on through members of that family, ended up in Oak Bay. And then by 1916, he comes into the guardianship of Beatrice, who was an English lady of working class background, who was very, very devoted to patriotic causes here in Canada, and who worked very hard from the start of the war, the Great War, to help the effort by raising funds. And so she did this by somehow or other training Muggins to not be afraid of strangers, which is a very unusual thing for a Spitz or a Pomeranian. They tend to be rather distrustful, as I knew from my own Spitz, Freddie. And so ultimately he collected what's estimated at the modern equivalent of $250,000 by those means.
And Muggins, as you point out, was most active in Victoria, which seemed to punch above its weight in terms of wartime collections as well.
Yes, that really speaks not only to Muggins but to the women of Victoria. I found an incredible mass of information in the newspapers and magazines and photographs of just what a galvanizing force the women of Victoria were on the home front. I'd always written about animals in a war setting on battlefields after the war, in recovery, like field hospitals and whatnot. I'd never written about the home front, and truly, I won't say that these women fought a battle, but they did everything that could possibly be done to support the troops, to support the war effort. The charities that Muggins collected for, the Red Cross, the Blue Cross, which was a charity for wounded animals who were conscripted to war, for orphanages, for prisoners of war, wounded veterans. They were many of the same charities that these women collected for on their own. And the children of Victoria were also incredibly important to the war effort. And again, there's quite a connection between Muggins and the children of Victoria. They all wanted to meet him. They wanted to stroke him. He was quite the draw. And of course, where the kids wanted to go, their mothers had to go. And so the coins got dropped in the tins, and one thing led to another, and he ended up raising a lot of money. But the women of Victoria were amazing in that period.
Now, after the war, it seems Muggins' mission changes a bit to become something of a poster boy for Victoria itself, but also for the GWVA, the forerunner of today's modern Legion system.
Yes, he was an omnipresent little sort of local celebrity at the Esquimalt Military Hospital during and after the war. He was always out there cheering the wounded men in hospital. I wish I could have reproduced all of the photos of him with them. Or with the nurses in my book, but there are quite a few. It's his presence was much loved, and the fact that after the war was over, he was able to slide into collecting for what we might call post-war hospital building, comforts for men who had returned. He built, or his collecting helped build what they called a refreshment pavilion out at the Esquimalt Military Hospital. He helped fund a brand new Heinzmann piano for this sort of entertainment area, a billiard table. He was used for this purpose, and as well as what you referred to for rather strange purpose of attracting people to move out to Victoria. I'm not sure why that was part of his picture, but I think Beatrice Woodward, his guardian, was so civic-minded that she had to keep busy doing what she could to help. And of course, it was important with these men who were returning to the city that they have a place to live, and that the city be a going concern, that there be jobs and whatnot. So it was all kind of part of the same effort.
And as we talked about earlier, Muggins continues to fundraise even in death, and you pointed out that this was done over in England as well, with animals being put in glass cases. But
yes,
what do you think it says about Muggins that his mystique, for lack of a better word, was so powerful even in death?
I think because the memory of what he had done was still so fresh. There were still so many people in Victoria who outlived him. He had a short life. He was only about 7 when he died in January 1920, and his death was such a great tragedy because he was so young. Because there were suggestions that he had been overworked, he'd been exposed to weather that wasn't good for him, that he'd been out in the cold, that kind of thing. And so he, the memory of this little dog was perpetuated through many living people who had met him. The Reverend Arthur Owen being one of them, a number of military men. He had met people like General Sir Arthur Currie, the Prince of Wales, the future King Edward VIII. So his pictures were everywhere for a good many years. And then the Red Cross perpetuated this. They were the ones who basically took over sort of took over Beatrice Woodward's job of using Muggins to raise funds. Although by that point they had his taxidermied body, which, as you mentioned, during World War II was brought out, and people were still putting coins in the tins for that war effort till the end.
And finally, Grant, what do you hope people take away from the book? Perhaps a deeper appreciation of animals, the satisfaction of a heartwarming story. What would you like people to take away most from this?
Well, I think all of the above, but I think the fact that for me, it's very important that we take animals seriously. Everyone, it amazed me and charmed and moved me to find that so many people over 100 years ago took this little dog very seriously. He wasn't a toy. He wasn't an amusement. He was considered a soldier on the front lines of the war effort. And when he died, the town went into mourning, and it was so drastically tragic for his guardian, Beatrice Woodward, that she actually left Victoria and moved to the U.S. She couldn't live here anymore. I know what that kind of grief is like, and it comes from a place of taking an animal's life seriously. And when that animal passes away, it's as hard, if not harder, than losing a human loved one. And so, I take animals seriously. I've hoped through the writing of all of my books about animals that people see that they should be taken seriously, and their loyalty and love appreciated.
All right. I think that's a fine place to leave it, Grant. The name of the book is Muggins, The Life and Afterlife of a Canadian Canine War Hero. It's available from Heritage House Publishing. My thanks to author Grant Hayter-Menzies.
Thank you very much.